Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ong En Oi from the Faculty of Education and Humanities, UNITAR International University. Today, I'm presenting my paper entitled Inclusive Education in Independent Chinese Secondary Schools in Sabah. Inclusive education has become an important focus of education system around the world. In Malaysia, much of the research has focused on inclusive practices in government schools. However, very little attention has been given to independent Chinese secondary schools, especially those in Sabah. My study explores how educators and teachers in these schools understand and implement inclusive education, the challenges they face, and strategies to help strengthen inclusive practices. My presentation consists of three parts. First, I will introduce the research background and context. Second, I will explain the methodology used in the study. Finally, I will present the key findings, recommendations, and implications. Let's begin with the research foundations. In this first section, I will briefly introduce the background of independent Chinese secondary school in Sabah. I will also explain the research problem and present the objectives of this study. Independent Chinese secondary schools have played an important role in providing multilingual education while preserving Chinese culture and heritage. Unlike government schools, they operate independently and do not receive government funding. These schools serve students from a wide range of academic, linguistic, and socio-economic backgrounds. As student diversity continues to grow, teachers are expected to meet the needs of learners with different abilities, including those require additional support. However, despite this increasing diversity, very little research has explored how inclusive education is understood and practiced in independent Chinese secondary schools in Sabah. This research gap inspired me to carry out this study. Three major challenges emerge from the existing context. The first is resource constraints. Many of these schools face limitation in terms of specialized teaching materials, assistive technology, and learning support facilities needed to effectively support diverse learners. The second challenge is teacher preparedness. Many teachers have limited access to professional development opportunities specifically related to inclusive education, which may affect their confidence and ability to implement inclusive practices. The third issue concerns policy implementation. Although inclusive education is encouraged at the national level, clear guidelines and practical mechanisms for implementation remain inconsistent across independent schools. These challenges highlight the importance of understanding educators' experiences and identifying practical strategies to strengthen inclusive education in these schools. This study is guided by three main objectives. First, it aims to examine the current implementation of inclusive education in Sabah's independent Chinese secondary schools. Second, it seeks to identify the systemic barriers that affect implementation, particularly in terms of institutional support, teachers' readiness, and available resources. Third, it aims to propose practical recommendations that schools can adopt to further strengthen inclusive practices. Ultimately, this study hopes to provide evidence that can support the development of more equitable learning opportunities for all students. I will now move on to the methodology used in this research. For this research, I used a qualitative case study because I wanted to understand educators' real experiences with inclusive education. The study follows an interpretivist approach, which means it focuses on how participants understand and interpret their own experiences. I also apply Bronfenbrenner ecological system theory to look at how different factors such as the school environment and support systems affect inclusive practices. To analyze the data, I used Braun and Clark's thematic analysis, which helped me identify the key themes that emerge from the participant responses. For data collection, this study employed three methods. The main method was semi-structured interviews, which allowed educators to share their experiences and insights in depth. These were complemented by questionnaire surveys to obtain a wider range of perspectives. In addition, document analysis was carried out to examine school policies, strategic plans, and other relevant documents related to institutional support. The use of multiple methods helped strengthen the reliability of the findings through triangulation. Purposive sampling was used to select participants who had relevant experience in teaching and school leadership. The study involved 22 educators from 8 independent Chinese secondary schools in Sabah, including principals, senior assistants, department heads, and teachers. By including participants from different roles and school contexts, the study was able to capture diverse perspectives and develop a deeper understanding of how inclusive education is perceived and practiced across the schools. I will now present the main findings that emerged from the study. Three major themes emerge regarding current inclusive practices. The first is flexible pedagogy, where teachers adapted their teaching approaches, differentiated instruction, and modified classroom activities to meet diverse learning needs. The second is peer support, with schools encouraging collaborative learning and student support, both academically and socially. The third is continuous adaptation, where teachers adjusted their practices based on students' needs and available resources. Overall, these findings show that inclusive practices exist in these schools, but they are often depend on teachers' personal initiative rather than systematic institutional support. Despite these positive efforts, three major barriers were identified. The first is resource scarcity, with schools reporting limitations in specialized teaching materials, assistive technology, and learning support services. The second is teacher preparedness, as educators highlight the need for more training in inclusive teaching strategies and classroom management. The third is institutional support, where clearer policies, stronger leadership commitment, and greater stakeholder collaboration are needed for sustainable implementation. These findings suggest that inclusive education requires not only teachers' efforts, but also coordinated support at the institutional and systemic levels. Based on the findings, three key recommendations are proposed. First, schools should strengthen teacher professional development through systematic training in inclusive pedagogy, differentiated instruction, and special educational needs. Second, resource allocation should be improved by investing in assistive technologies, learning materials, and support services. Third, clearer school-level policies and implementation frameworks should be developed to promote more consistent inclusive practices across independent Chinese secondary schools in Sabah. Together, these recommendations can help create more inclusive learning environments where every student has equal opportunities to succeed. In conclusion, this study shows that educators in Sabah independent Chinese secondary schools generally support inclusive education. However, addressing challenges related to resources, teachers' preparedness, and institutional support is essential for effective implementation. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to UNITAR International University, the participating ICSS schools in Sabah, and IVES for their support and for providing this valuable platform to share my paper. Please feel free to email me any questions and comments. Thank you.